After being bounced from foster home to foster home, I was finally placed in my final foster home that had 9 other children. My foster mother was a single mom who had 5 biological children. She then fostered and later adopted 5 more children. When I was 4 years old, I was adopted into that home, or orphanage, as I often describe it, and my name was changed to Tanika Slater. For as long as I can remember, I wanted to be a performer. I would sing for anybody that would listen. I remember being a toddler and standing in front of Toys R Us in the mall when I was like 3 years old, singing, I love you, you love me. And yes, people were kind and gave me a few quarters, but really I was just so happy to be performing for them. In this later home, there was a lot that wasn't. There wasn't a lot of food, as you can imagine, with so many mouths to feed. I have vivid memories of locks on the kitchen cabinets and oftentimes going hungry. There wasn't a lot of warmth, literally and figuratively. I will never forget the winter when I was 11 years old, when there was no heat in the house, and we all slept in one bedroom together, all 10 plus of us, with heating blankets and as many clothes as we could put on, huddled up, trying to keep warm. I call this the Ice Age. And there certainly wasn't money for music lessons, but we did go to church. And boy, did I love church. You know, church is where I think I caught my first spark of hope. I remember when the choir director gave me my very first solo in the children's choir. Ooh, you couldn't tell me nothing. Ooh. Little did she know that she was lighting the flame that continues to fuel my dream today. Despite my poverty-stricken surroundings, I always knew I wanted big things. I wanted to be on Broadway. I wanted to be on TV. I wanted to be successful and somehow make a difference in this world. I looked around me and I said, this can't be it. This will not be my life. There has to be another way. So then I got this idea in my head, an accurate and challenging idea, that I wouldn't get a chance at any of those dreams unless I got an education. Education, education, education. Education is the key to success, they say. No one around me encouraged education. None of my adoptive or biological children in the house I grew up in went to college or even graduated high school. And I knew I wanted something different. So I made it a point to be a straight A student, even if no one at home noticed or cared. I was going to be the best student that I could be. I worked as hard as I could, not telling anyone that I was literally freezing at home, or that I was worried where my next meal would come from. I kept working, I kept singing, I kept studying. And then my 8th grade teacher, Patty Forbes, who I'm still very close with today, saw my work ethic and took me under her wing. She stayed late with me after school almost every day when it was clear that I was avoiding having to go home. To this day, she's the very first person I clearly remember saying, I love you, to me. And it meant the world. When I was assigned to a public high school for the next year, she came to me with an idea. How about you apply to a private school? You're very special, and I think you would thrive in a smaller school environment. She called the McDuffie School, a private school on a hill not far from our public middle school, and she told them, if you accept this girl, your school will never be the same again. Now, I want to pause here to tell you why I'm bringing up her doing that. It's not that I want to sneak in a little bit about how awesome I was at 15 years old. It's to make it clear that, yes, I worked hard for my dreams, but that these dreams were pushed forward, sometimes forcefully, by people who cared. And without them, I don't know how this story would have gone. So, for those of you who are advocates, who are teachers, who are mentors, who are guidance counselors and therapists, who are social workers, who are foster parents and adoptive parents, I want to shout it from the rooftops. Your work makes a difference. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you for all that you do. With Patty's support, I marched up to the McDuffie School in my best hand-me-down clothes, and I picked up an application, even though I had no idea where the money to actually attend would come from. And then, a few weeks later, like a miracle, Patty Forbes and my other middle school teachers came running up to me with a newspaper that said, "Want to go to a private school for free?" Yes. Thank you. I did want to go to a private school for free. And you bet I applied for that scholarship. And then I waited, and I hoped, and I kept working, and I kept studying and singing. And I want to pause here again, because, as you probably guessed, I did get that scholarship. And because, though it felt like a miracle, and it was miraculous in my life, I know it was only possible because of the work of real people doing things like writing grants and planning every technicality of that program. I know it took the generosity of donors and educators like Mrs. Gibson, my now mom, who spearheaded that program to give access to a private education to inner city kids like me. So, thank you, Mom. And thank you also to those of you who work so diligently and sometimes thanklessly to make these amazing things happen for young people. So, now a student at McDuffie, I was thriving. Oh, I loved McDuffie. I felt seen, I felt supported, I felt valued. Though things were getting increasingly difficult at home, at school, I was fine. I was the lead in every musical, the vice president of the student body, while still studying and staying on the honor roll. Education, education, education. I felt my dreams within reach. And then, in my junior year, my first adopted mother passed away from breast cancer. And suddenly my world turned upside down. I was going to be placed back into foster care, which meant I would have to change schools. I would no longer be able to attend my beloved McDuffie. I felt like I'd been walking on this yellow brick road to success, and then it just disappeared under my feet. Because as far as a dream and a song and hard work can get you, if there's no support to hold you up, you look down and suddenly see the possibility of failure. Distraught, I went to the courthouse to petition for emancipation, but was told that it wasn't possible in Massachusetts since I was 2 weeks shy of my 17th birthday. Therefore, I needed to find a legal guardian by the end of the day by 5 p.m., or I would be placed back into foster care and would have to leave McDuffie. One of the social workers at the courthouse let me use their landline phone. Do we still have this? I called the school and I told the guidance counselor what was going on. She called every teacher and all of my friends' parents to see if anyone could take me in. It was nearing the end of the day, and I was losing hope when I look up to see Mrs. Gibson, the headmistress of the school, the principal, there to take me home with her. From the first dinner with the Gibsons, everything felt different. There were obvious differences. They are white and atheist. I am Black and grew up Christian. But there were also obvious similarities. My dad wakes up at 5 a.m., 6 a.m. to practice the cello. He saw and understood the part of me striving towards a dream, the part of me that was drawn to music and performing. And so he found me a voice teacher, drove me almost an hour twice a week to voice lessons, and he taught me music theory and oral comprehension. Both my parents gave me After so much of running on my own 2 feet, the most amazing, engaged encouragement and support in my life and career. But the biggest difference of all that I felt with the Gibsons was the sudden presence of unconditional love. I remember one day, after a long day at school, I came home exhausted and was watching TV in the living room. My mom, Mrs. Gibson at the time, came in, and I thought I was going to get in trouble because the TV was too loud. I felt myself tense up, and before I even knew it, I was trying to figure out how to make things right again. Because you see, in my life so far, I had been taught that love and care only came as a reward for hard work and proving myself worthy of someone's investment in me. Love was earned, not freely given. But then I realized Mrs. Gibson, my mom, was there with a plate of cookies and a glass of warm milk because she knew that I had had a long day. All I could do was cry from her love and kindness. Throughout my final year of high school, the Gibsons and I continued to get to know each other, our love for each other growing deeper and deeper. When I received my acceptance letter to NYU to study vocal performance, along with a letter saying I was to be awarded a full scholarship to college for students who have overcome adversity, I was just overcome with emotion and immense gratitude to everyone in my life who had helped me get there. My dreams were right there for the taking at last. The Gibsons were only supposed to be my guardians until my 18th birthday. I don't know what I expected to happen when I went off to college, as I had only been with them for a year and a half. Before packing up for college, as I was becoming increasingly worried that this was the end of our relationship, they sat me down to talk. They started by saying, "We love you unconditionally, as if you were our daughter, and we'd like to legally adopt you." I was blown away. I was so grateful for their love and support, but never in a million years did I expect them to adopt me. Of course, I'd secretly hoped for it, but it just seemed like way too much to ask when they had already been so generous. Yes, I would absolutely love to be your daughter and for you to be my parents forever. So, I went to NYU and kept working hard, kept studying, kept singing. And when I had vacations from school, I felt like the luckiest person in the world that I had a home to go to for Thanksgiving and Christmas and birthdays and summer breaks. That I had parents to call when I was struggling with a class or going through a breakup. That when I was in a show at school, I could look out into the audience and see my parents beaming with unconditional love. Then, in my senior year of college, my parents kept their promise and legally adopted me when I was 22 years old. All my college friends came and we had a big party, and my name was changed again to Tanika Gibson. It was one of the best days of my life. So, I've graduated college. Now it's time to see if my dream of being a performer was truly possible. I got my education, I have wonderful supportive parents, I perfected my craft of singing. Now this was the true test. After what seemed like hundreds of auditions, I finally made my Broadway debut as Diana Ross in Ain't Too Proud, The Life and Times of the Temptations. An achievement that was only made more special by having my parents, who have loved me and who so fiercely supported this dream of mine, in the audience. It's kind of wild that by the time I was 22, I had been in foster care and legally adopted twice, had 3 different birth certificates and social security cards with 3 different names. But I wouldn't have it any other way, because this journey led me to accomplishing my dreams, and most importantly, led me to my parents, to my forever family, to my home. So to end, I want to say, thank you, Mom and Dad, for loving me and for being in my home. Thank you to You Gotta Believe in the Office of Children and Family Services, whose mission it is to connect children with amazing, loving, permanent parents. And thank you to the amazing parents here today who have opened their hearts to provide permanent, unconditionally loving homes to other kids like me. Because as we know, there's no place like home.
Let me try to pull myself together. Tanika, thank you. Mr. Gibson, thank you for your performance. Mrs. Gibson, thank you. I feel like my parents are in the room because I could just feel that love line. Like it just felt familiar. I'm like, are my parents here? I just want everyone to be reminded that it's not a requirement for adoptees to share their story. While there's a lot of beauty in adoption, there's a lot of pain, there's a lot of loss. So I just want to honor you again, Tanika, for always being willing to be so vulnerable and sharing your story, the ups and the downs, and that even though you have your family, the past is still here. We still wrestle with it. That's just the reality. So you're just so courageous and so brave, and I just appreciate you. And just one more thing I want to say is that people often think about soulmates in the romantic context. I think my parents are my soulmate. My family is my soulmate. And I think about it in that way because it's just, in my story too, there was an amazing set of unbelievable circumstances that led me to my parents. And I also grew up in the church and sang in the church choir. They didn't ask me to do any solos. Just happy to celebrate this power of family. It doesn't matter what it looks like. Just love is love, and thank you. And speaking of people with personal connections to adoption and foster care who are brave enough to share their stories, I have the privilege of working with this amazing woman, Anamita Reynolds, who, although she is younger than I am, I look up to her, and I honor her, and she doesn't know that I pay attention to her and the way she tells her story and the way that she moves, and I learn a lot from her. And so Namita's going to talk about the important, just phenomenal work that she's doing on the front lines with our youth who are trying to be adopted, youth who are resistant to adoption because they've been told that they're too old, and working with our youth who have thankfully been placed. So she's in every phase of our mission and just on the front lines doing that amazing work. So with that, Namita Reynolds coming up.
Okay, so I didn't know you look up to me. Now I gotta get it together all over again. Okay. Y'all got me good today. I wasn't prepared for the works. But a little bit about me. I went into the foster care system at 2 weeks old, and then I was adopted at the age of 5. And then I wasn't told about my adoption until I was 13 years old, which was where I first met my therapist. And she followed me for well over 20 years of my life. I know I don't look that old. I lived a little bit of life, people. And while working with my therapist, that's where I understood a lot of my trauma and what went on in my life and what went on in my life story and how I wanted to tell it and who I wanted to be. And the main part of it was that I didn't want my story to be the only thing that was unique about me. And I didn't want it to be the only thing that was used for like any type of gain. And I also realized that my story isn't the only part of who I am as a person. And when I learned that and I realized that, a couple of years later, I got an interview for You Gotta Believe. And they asked me one of the hardest questions I've ever experienced in my life, and it was, who's unconditionally committed to you? And can I buy a vow and a definition? And so they gave me one, and I had to stop, and I actually asked my interviewers, I said, can you guys give me a second? Because I have to think about it. Now, at this point, I was already adopted and been adopted for years, but I just didn't feel this love connection with my adopted family. And it wound up being one of my mentors. His name is Mr. Streety, and he is the first person in my life who ever saw me. He's the first person in my life who saw me not for an adoptive child, but just for a person. And I was like, oh my God, he's gonna be my dad. He does not know it. I'm gonna ask him. It's gonna be a thing. I'm gonna make it a thing. And so when I started working here, and I had to answer that question, I was like, this is what this means. This is what this feeling is supposed to be like. And so, hit the front lines running. I started off my advocacy journey as an advocate and speaking, talking about my story and telling people what it is that I've been through. And then I took a little bit of a break from that, and then I came back and started teaching math class for our potential parents and letting them know about my story and what's going on. And then now I'm just wearing multiple hats. And working with the youth is always going to be my favorite part of my job. I need them to understand that family is our right, that they deserve it, and that all of the no's are going to lead them to the yes that's gonna last forever. When I found my adopted dad, morally adopted dad, and I had to tell him what it is I felt for the first time, I was like, oh my God, this is gonna be so bad. He's gonna be like, what is going on? She has too many feelings, it's a lot. And it wasn't. He literally was like, and he's the only person who ever gave me a nickname, and my mom hated it, and I loved it so much. Full name is Namicha, but he nicknamed me Naya. And I was like, yeah, I like that. The first person to ever give me a nickname, I like that. And then when I told him, I was just like, you know, like, you're more like my dad than like a mentor. And he was like, you know, I felt the same way. And I call him for everything at any given time of the day. And he picks up. And he always says, hey baby, what you need? And even sometimes when I'm trying to hide what's going on, he's like, okay, are we gonna get to the point? Because, you know, I'm a busy man and I do have things to do. So like, whatever you're trying to hide, let's maneuver past it and let me know. And I'm like, okay. And he's the only one who's able to do that. He's the only one that puts a hard stop to when I'm trying to block my emotions, and he gets straight to the point. And my life has been forever changed for me and him. And so working at You Gotta Believe has turned my life full circle, because I've even worked with the agency that I was adopted by. And I am so happy to be a part of this process. I'm so happy to share, and I'm so happy to be the voice for the youth that we serve, so that they understand that family, the family that they get is going to be forever. So thank you all.
Now we're going to bring Acting Commissioner back up for our next speaker.
Thank you all. I do have to get myself together. Hold on. Thank you so much for sharing your story. I think everyone in here felt your love. Thank you, Mrs. Gibson, for sharing her with us. We appreciate it. Thank you, Namicha, for your story. It's so hard, right, to share that story. So we are grateful and we are honored. And speaking of honor, it is my honor now to introduce our next speaker. It's a pleasure to welcome Karen Priscitelli-Keough. She is the secretary to the Governor Kathy Hochul, our first female governor in New York State. So her passion and support of vulnerable New Yorkers is clear from her educational path. Like so many of us in child welfare, she holds a master's degree in industrial social work from Columbia University. And before re-entering government service, Secretary Keough sat on a number of nonprofit boards, including iFoster, which provides support to older children in foster care and their caregivers. There's so much more we can say about Secretary Keough and her many accomplishments. She is a trailblazer in her own right. But her role today is as a parent with lived experience, a personal journey as an adoptive parent, and an advocate is what brings her here to us today. So Secretary Akil, we are honored to have you here to hear a little bit about what this means for
Well, this has been such a moving program. First, Tanika and the Gibsons, I mean, really struck my heart, and what a beautiful story. Naya, wow, Gail, and Commissioner, thank you. I bring greetings on behalf of the Governor. I'll just say a few things. First, know that you have an advocate in me, and also in Catherine Garcia, who's an adoptee, at the highest levels of government in New York State. Something Catherine and I talk about often. We feel passionately about it. And just know that your voice is being heard and seen. After 9/11, my husband came into my office at home, and he said, I'm having a really tough time trying to figure out what to give you for Christmas. It was a really difficult time, and we're very into gift giving, thoughtful gift giving. It's not the money, it's the thought. And I said, you know, this is such a tough year. I really don't know what a gift would look like this year, honey. And I said, let me think about it. And I said, you know, we've been talking about adoption. And I'm thinking for Christmas you could do some research and figure out how we actually do that. And that brought us to COAC and math classes, thank you. I didn't know I was gonna cry. That brought us to COAC and math classes and Janae Belson. And by the fall of 2003, we were meeting Jessica. Jessica was then 9 years old, adorable little girl. I remember the car ride. I remember the night before, my husband not being able to sleep, us just staying up all night thinking, what's tomorrow gonna be like when we meet Jessica? The car ride there, my husband crying and saying, what if she doesn't like me? I remember the first time I saw her in the waiting room, and you know, here we are, all these years later, and I'll just say it was a beautiful, beautiful coming together of our families. We connected, you know, instantly. We had a lot of common interests. Jessica had been fostered basically her entire life, was with a very loving family for a number of years who, for complicated reasons, couldn't adopt her. We stayed in touch with them for a very long time. And today she's a certified nursing assistant living on Long Island with a very nice boyfriend and a dog. And she's the light of our life. And I often say to my husband, Jessica's the best thing we ever did as a couple. Absolutely, hands down. There were so many, I mean, Tanika, you referred to this, there's so many moments over time that demonstrated we were meant to be together. Little things, big things. We love theater, live sporting events, cooking, baking, anything actionary, just things that we all clicked on. There were some physical features. Jessica and I resemble each other enough that I mean, it's uncanny sometimes. People say, oh, you guys look alike, or what have you. But it was more the spiritual and the emotional connection from the very, very beginning. She's a very special young woman. We feel blessed beyond. I thank Janae Belson, the social worker who connected us, and I think, as the commissioner mentioned, I'm a social worker, so I didn't do adoption and foster care, but I, of course, had training in the early years. And Janae got to know us and got to know Jessica and connected us, and it was, I'm forever grateful to her. So I would just end by saying, and I thank all the advocates, all the folks in foster care and adoption, and the families, the therapists, the clinicians. It really does take a village. We had a lot of help and support. But just remember that when you adopt a child, it's not just a home. It's stability, it's consistency, it's hope, it's possibility, it's helping them reach their God-given potential. And that means everything. And I have really focused on older children. That has become a passion of mine. I foster the organization that was mentioned was one I was involved with. I think it's so important, particularly for older children, those who have aged out. We've informally helped and fostered children in my daughter's network and that we've met along the way. It's just so critically important what we all do and you all do, frankly. And I'm here as a support and a cheerleader anytime you need it. And thank you for inviting me to stay for you.
Thank you so much, Secretary. Truly an inspiration. Such an incredible example of what we do mean by opening our hearts and then opening our homes. I think many people, right, have that same story there, so I thank you. And it sends such a powerful message, as you mentioned, right? We have an incredible advocate at the highest levels of state government that know exactly what you all do, what our mission is, and we're all here to help. So I feel honored to work in this administration where I know human services and specifically foster care and adoption is supported and it will thrive for that reason. As you know, we heard from Lieutenant Governor, and again, I just can't say thank you enough for the support of this administration. But this time, I'd like to welcome back Jennifer Pinder. We're truly grateful for this partnership, so thank you so much for hosting us. We thank all of your staff for sharing their time. Thank you so much. We'll bring you back to close us out.
Thank you again to OCFS. It's just been an amazing opportunity to host this celebration together and continue to strengthen our relationship and work together with this mission of finding homes for older youth in foster care. Thank you, Secretary, for coming. I know your time is valuable, as is everyone else's. Thank you again to Tanika and the Gibsons. As we close, I just want to point out that we do have some refreshments in the back, water, coffee, tea, and also these beautiful step and repeats. Please commemorate this day that we spent together. And thank you again, and happy National Adoption Awareness